I knew the exact second everything ended. There was no screaming, no slammed doors, no betrayal. Just a sentence. I don't think I'll ever be able to marry you. He said it softly, like he was afraid the words themselves might hurt me. We were sitting on his couch, the one that still had that slight dip in the middle where we always curled into each other. The lamp in the corner was on. It cast that warm yellow light that made everything feel safe. I remember thinking just seconds before he spoke how ordinary the moment felt. That's what makes it worse. Heartbreak doesn't always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it slips into the room quietly and sits down beside you. When he said it, I didn't react immediately. It was like my brain needed to buffer. Then my chest tightened, and I started crying. Not the pretty kind, not a single cinematic tear, the kind where your body betrays you. My breathing went uneven, my hands started shaking, my vision blurred. And he didn't pull away. He wrapped his arms around me, held me like he always did, like he hadn't just dismantled our future. "I'm so sorry," he whispered into my hair. And somehow that hurt more, because there was no villain, no one to blame. Just two people who loved each other and wanted different lives. That night, we broke up, but it didn't look like a breakup. We went to dinner. We laughed. We talked about what we loved about each other. We slept next to each other one last time. And at 7 a.m., I walked out of his house alone. I sent him a short text. He sent one back. And we haven't spoken since. This was the kindest breakup I will ever experience, and it has destroyed me more than cruelty ever could. If you've ever had to let go of someone who treated you well, if you've ever lost a relationship not because it was toxic, but because it was incompatible, this story is for you. On this channel, we tell the stories people whisper to themselves at 2 a.m., the ones that don't have clean villains, the ones that don't give you the satisfaction of anger. Because sometimes the hardest heartbreak isn't betrayal, it's timing, it's fear, it's two futures that don't line up. If that sounds familiar, subscribe to the breakup stories. You're not weak for grieving something that was beautiful. Now, let me tell you how I fell in love with the gentlest man I've ever known, and why loving him wasn't enough. I met him when we were both 25. It was at a friend's birthday party in Chicago. A cramped apartment, too many people, music low enough to talk over. He wasn't the loudest guy in the room. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was standing near the kitchen island, listening to a conversation about travel like it actually mattered. When I made some sarcastic comment about how adulthood felt like a group project nobody agreed to, he laughed. And I noticed him, not because he was flashy, but because he felt steady. We ended up on the balcony later that night. It was cold, early spring kind of cold, and I didn't bring a jacket. He handed me his hoodie without hesitation. "You'll freeze," he said. I remember pulling it over my hands and thinking, this feels easy. No games, no performance, just ease. We started dating slowly. Coffee dates turned into dinner dates turned into staying over turned into toothbrushes in each other's bathrooms. He was different from anyone I'd dated before. My previous serious relationship had been intense, emotional highs and lows, passion that felt like chaos. This was calm. He'd text me good morning every day. He'd ask how my meeting went. He'd remember small things, like how I hated cilantro, or how I got anxious before calling my mom. He made me feel safe. About 3 months in, we were lying in bed one night when I asked him what he wanted long term. He went quiet for a second. Then he said, "Honestly, I don't really believe in marriage." I propped myself up on my elbow. "What do you mean?" He shrugged slightly. "I just didn't grow up seeing healthy ones. They all fell apart. It feels like signing up for something that's destined to fail." It wasn't said with bitterness, just resignation. I laughed lightly. "That's dramatic." He smiled. Maybe. Then he kissed me, and I let it go, because I believed something dangerous. Love changes people. I've always wanted marriage, kids, a house filled with noise and warmth. When I told him that once, he smiled softly and said, "That sounds beautiful." Not, "I want that too," but I heard what I wanted to hear. I told myself he'll get there. He just needs more time. We're only 27. But deep down, I knew I was building a future he had never promised me, and denial is comfortable until it isn't. There's a very specific kind of anxiety that comes from loving someone who isn't sure about forever. It's not loud, it doesn't show up as fights, it shows up as questions you're afraid to ask. Around the 2-year mark, something shifted in me. Nothing dramatic happened. He didn't change. I did. It started with small moments, scrolling through Instagram and seeing engagement announcements, going to another wedding, listening to my coworkers talk about buying houses with their partners. Every time, I'd feel this strange mix of joy and dread. Joy because I wanted that. Dread because I didn't know if I was building towards it. One night, we were making dinner together. He was chopping vegetables, focused, calm like always. I said casually, "Do you ever think about where we'll be in 5 years?" He didn't look up. "I try not to plan that far." I laughed lightly. "Why?" He paused for a half second too long. "I just don't like locking myself into something I'm not 100% sure about." The knife kept hitting the cutting board, rhythmic, controlled. I felt something tighten in my chest. "Are you not sure about us?" I asked. He finally looked at me. "No, I'm sure about you. I'm just not sure about the structure." The structure. Marriage. Forever. Legal commitment. The thing I'd wanted since I was a kid. He walked over and kissed my forehead. "I love you," he said. And that should have been enough. But it wasn't, because love without direction feels like floating, and I was starting to feel seasick. My friends noticed before I admitted it. On brunch one Sunday, my best friend leaned across the table and said, "Do you feel secure?" I answered too quickly. "Yes." She tilted her head. "Then why do you look like you're bracing?" That word stuck with me. Bracing. Like I was waiting for impact. Like I already knew something was coming. I started noticing things I had ignored before. How he'd change the subject anytime engagement came up. How he'd say things like, "We're still young," whenever I mentioned timelines. How he never once used the word wife when talking about me. It wasn't cruelty. It was consistency. He had always been honest. I was the one translating his honesty into hope. The real shift happened on a quiet Tuesday night. Nothing special about it. We were sitting on his couch, the same one, legs tangled, TV playing something neither of us was really watching. I don't even remember how the conversation started, but I remember what I said. "I don't want to wake up at 35 and realize I stayed somewhere that wasn't moving forward." The room went very still. He muted the TV. That's when I knew this was different. He didn't rush to reassure me. He didn't joke. He just stared at his hands. And then he said it. "I don't think I'll ever get there." My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Get where?" I asked, even though I knew. "Marriage, kids, that whole lifelong commitment thing." He exhaled slowly. "I thought I could. I really did. I thought loving you would fix whatever block I have about it." My throat tightened. But it didn't. There was no anger in his voice, no irritation, just disappointment in himself. "I don't want to promise you something I can't give," he continued, "and I don't want you to give up something you've always wanted." That's when I started crying. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet at first, tears sliding down my face while I tried to keep my breathing steady. "So what does that mean?" I whispered. He looked at me with eyes that were already glossy. "It means I love you enough not to trap you." That sentence felt like a knife wrapped in silk, gentle but sharp. "Are you breaking up with me?" I asked. His voice broke slightly. "I think we have to." There it was. No explosion, no raised voices. Just two people sitting in a softly lit living room, realizing love wasn't going to bridge the gap. I tried to bargain. "Maybe we don't need to decide right now." He shook his head. "That's not fair to you. Every year you stay hoping I'll change is a year you're not building the life you want." I hated that he was right. I hated that he was being selfless, because selfish would have been easier to leave. I asked him the question I'd been afraid of for 2 years. If I didn't want marriage, would we be okay? He looked at me like that question hurt him more than anything else I'd said. "You shouldn't have to shrink your dreams to fit me." And that was the moment everything truly shifted, because he wasn't rejecting me, he was refusing to let me betray myself, and somehow that made it worse. I started crying harder then, the kind where your chest physically aches. He pulled me into him, held me, not like someone detaching, like someone grieving. We stayed like that for a long time, neither of us speaking, just breathing. Finally, he said softly, "I'm going to miss you." My throat burned. "I'm going to miss you too." And that was it. No dramatic declarations, no last-minute reversal, just grief. Quiet, heavy, real. At 7 a.m., I woke up first. The room was gray with early morning light. He was still asleep, face relaxed, breathing steady. I watched him for a long time, trying to accept that this was the last time I'd see him like this, the last time I'd be part of his morning. I didn't wake him up. I couldn't handle a second goodbye. I got dressed quietly, stood in the doorway for a second, and then I left. The door clicked shut behind me, and just like that, 2 years became memory. When I got to my car, I sat there for 10 minutes before I could start the engine. My hands were shaking. I sent him a text. "Thank you for loving me the way you did." It felt small compared to what I wanted to say. He replied a few minutes later. "Thank you for showing me what real love feels like." I stared at that message until my vision blurred, and then the silence began. We haven't spoken since. No angry follow-ups, no drunk texts, no "did we make a mistake?" Just silence. And somehow that silence has been the loudest thing I've ever experienced. The first week felt unreal, like I was living slightly outside of my own body. I went to work, I answered emails, I smiled when I needed to, but everything felt muted, like someone had turned a volume of my life down to 30%. The hardest part wasn't anger. I kept waiting for anger, waiting for something sharp enough to hold on to. But there was none. He hadn't betrayed me. He hadn't lied. He hadn't chosen someone else. He had chosen honesty. And how do you rage against honesty? Instead, I grieved, in quiet, inconvenient waves. I cried in the shower because it felt private. I cried in my car before walking into work. I cried in the grocery store when I reached for his favorite cereal out of habit. Grief is strange when the person is still alive, because you know they're out there, existing, breathing, living their life, just without you. The second week was worse. The adrenaline of the breakup wore off. Reality settled in. He wasn't going to text. There would be no "I changed my mind," no dramatic airport confession, just absence. I kept picking up my phone automatically, wanting to send him something small, a meme, a random thought, a "did you see this?" But I stopped myself every time, because what would that accomplish? Reopening something we both knew couldn't move forward? That's the cruel part. There was no uncertainty. We didn't break up in confusion, we broke up in clarity, and clarity leaves no room for hope. I missed the smallest things. The way he'd rest his hand on my lower back when we crossed the street. The way he'd say, "drive safe," every time I left. The way he'd fall asleep halfway through movies and deny it the next day. It's funny what your brain chooses to replay. Not the big romantic gestures, the small, ordinary tenderness. That's what haunted me. Around week 3, the self-doubt started creeping in. What if I was too rigid? What if marriage isn't that important? What if I threw away something rare because of a technicality? I hated that thought because it felt like betrayal of myself. I sat on my bedroom floor, back against the bed, phone in my hand, staring at our old photos. We looked happy. We were happy. That's what made it unbearable. I whispered out loud, "Was love not enough?" The silence answered, and that's when the real grief hit. This wasn't about not loving each other, it was about wanting different endings, and there is no compromise between forever and for now. My friends tried to help. They said things like, if he wanted to, he would. But that wasn't true. He did want to, he just couldn't. And that distinction mattered. It's easier to move on when someone chooses against you. It's harder when they choose what they believe is right for both of you. He didn't reject me, he refused to hold me back, and some twisted part of me admired him for that, which made missing him worse. One night, about a month after the breakup, I had a dream that we were still together. Nothing dramatic, we were just grocery shopping, arguing about which pasta to buy. I woke up reaching for him, and the emptiness beside me felt violent. That was the morning I broke down completely. Not controlled crying, not quiet tears, full body sobbing. I slid down the side of my bed and just let it happen, because I had been trying to be strong, trying to be mature about it, trying to frame it as healthy. But heartbreak doesn't care how logical it is. It still hurts. I cried for almost an hour, and somewhere in the middle of it, a thought surfaced. If I stayed, I would have resented him. That truth settled slowly. If I stayed, I would have watched every proposal announcement with bitterness. I would have waited and waited, and maybe one day I would have woken up 35 and furious. Not at him, at myself. Because deep down, I've always known what I wanted. Marriage wasn't about a party, it was about commitment, security, building something permanent. And he didn't believe in permanence. Not the way I did. That wasn't his fault, but it wasn't mine either. Around 6 weeks in, something shifted. Not dramatically, subtly. I realized I hadn't cried that entire day. It shocked me. I still missed him, but the grief wasn't swallowing me whole. It was just present, like background music. I started going on long walks after work. No headphones, just quiet. I let my thoughts run, and instead of replaying our last conversation, I started asking myself different questions. What do I want my life to look like in 5 years? What kind of partner do I want beside me? What kind of love feels secure? For the first time, I wasn't picturing him in the answers, and that realization hurt, but it also felt honest. I started therapy, not because I was spiraling, but because I didn't want to carry silent resentment into my next relationship. My therapist said something that stuck with me. Sometimes loving someone isn't about staying, it's about releasing them when your paths diverge. That word, diverge. Not explode, not collapse, just slowly move in different directions. I had spent 2 years hoping he would turn toward my path, but he had always been facing his own. One evening, about 2 months after the breakup, I looked at myself in the mirror. Red eyes, softer expression, tired but steady, and I said out loud, "You didn't lose him because you weren't enough." My voice cracked. "You lost him because you wanted more." And that was the first time it didn't feel like rejection. It felt like alignment. Painful alignment, but alignment nonetheless. I wasn't abandoned. I wasn't unlovable. I wasn't too much. I simply refused to shrink my dreams to keep someone comfortable. And suddenly, the narrative shifted. I wasn't broken. I was awake. The day I truly felt the shift was random. I was at the gym, halfway through a workout. A song came on that used to remind me of him. Normally, I would have skipped it, but I didn't. I let it play, and instead of collapsing into memory, I felt gratitude. We had something real. It was beautiful. It just wasn't built for the future I wanted. And for the first time, I didn't need him to change. I didn't need a different ending. I just needed acceptance. That doesn't mean I stopped missing him. I still think about him sometimes, wonder what he's doing, if he ever questions his decision, if he ever imagines what our kids would have looked like. But I don't spiral anymore, because I understand something now. Love without shared vision is just comfort, and comfort isn't the same as commitment. He was the kindest relationship I've ever had, and maybe that's why it had to end, because I learned what healthy felt like. Now I just need healthy and aligned, and I won't apologize for wanting both. Healing didn't look dramatic. There was no sudden transformation, no haircut montage, no new me announcement. It was quiet. It looked like waking up one morning and realizing my chest didn't feel as heavy. It looked like cooking dinner for myself instead of ordering takeout and crying. It looked like putting my phone down at night without checking if he had posted anything. It looked like choosing to sit in silence and not feel abandoned by it. About 3 months after the breakup, I noticed something small but significant. I wasn't counting the days anymore. At first, every week felt monumental. 2 weeks since we broke up, 1 month, 6 weeks, like I was measuring distance from an earthquake. But eventually, the numbers stopped mattering. Life slowly filled the spaces he used to occupy. I started running again, something I had stopped doing during our relationship because we preferred slow mornings together. I forgot how strong it made me. The rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement felt grounding. I started journaling at night, not about him, about me, what I wanted, what scared me, what I refused to settle for again. And something surprising happened. The more honest I was with myself, the less I romanticized what we had. Not because it wasn't good, but because I could finally see it clearly. He wasn't confused. He wasn't secretly planning to propose. He wasn't on the verge of transformation. He had always been exactly who he said he was. I just loved him enough to hope he would change. And hope can be beautiful, but it can also be blinding. Around month 4, I went to another wedding. I almost didn't go. I didn't want to feel that familiar ache, but I forced myself. When the bride walked down the aisle, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel jealousy. I felt clarity. I didn't want a wedding just because everyone else was doing it. I wanted a partner who looked at me and felt certainty, not hesitation, not internal debate. Certainty. That realization was like air filling my lungs after holding my breath for years. I didn't want to convince someone to choose me. I wanted someone who already had. Then, one afternoon, it happened. A notification. He liked one of my photos. My stomach flipped. It was a simple picture. Me at a friend's rooftop birthday party, laughing. Nothing dramatic, but seeing his name on my screen felt like someone knocking on a door I had just managed to close. For a split second, my mind raced. Does this mean he misses me? Is he reaching out indirectly? Should I text him? And then, calm. Not forced calm, real calm. I put my phone down because a like isn't a reconciliation, a notification isn't a future, and kindness doesn't mean access. That was the moment I knew something had changed inside me. A few months ago, that notification would have wrecked my entire day. Now, it was just information. He existed, I existed, separately, and that was okay. Here's the truth I didn't understand before. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build yourself. He didn't owe me a different answer. He didn't owe me a changed belief system. He didn't owe me marriage. And I didn't owe him the sacrifice of my dreams. We didn't fail. We diverged. And there's something quietly powerful about accepting that without bitterness. There was one final moment of clarity that sealed it for me. I was sitting on my couch one evening, my couch now, in my apartment, thinking about how peaceful the room felt. No tension, No unspoken questions, just stillness. And I imagined something. I imagined him calling me, telling me he changed his mind, telling me he was ready for marriage now. And instead of relief, I felt hesitation because I realized something profound. I don't want someone who had to lose me to see my value. I want someone who sees it immediately. I don't want someone who debates forever with me. I want someone who runs toward forever with me. That shift wasn't angry. It wasn't resentful. It was grounded. He was a good man, but he wasn't my man. And that distinction changed everything. People always expect some dramatic glow up, but my glow up was internal. It was boundaries. It was self-trust. It was no longer romanticizing potential over reality. It was believing that my desire for commitment wasn't too much. It was understanding that compatibility isn't just about chemistry, it's about direction. I still hope he's okay. I still hope he finds peace with whatever path he chooses. And if one day he meets someone who doesn't want marriage, someone perfectly aligned with his worldview, I hope they're happy, truly. Because loving someone doesn't disappear just because the relationship does. But here's what I know now. I will not abandon myself to keep someone else comfortable. I will not downplay my dreams to maintain closeness. I will not confuse kindness with compatibility ever again. And that feels like justice. Not revenge, not winning, just alignment. The last time I thought about texting him was random. I had a good day at work. Something exciting happened, and my first instinct was still, for half a second, to tell him. Then I paused, and instead I called my best friend. And as I was laughing on the phone, I realized something quietly beautiful. My life was moving forward without him. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I started loving myself just a little more. And that's the kind of ending that doesn't feel loud. It feels steady. It feels earned. It feels peaceful. I don't know who I'll marry one day, but I know this. The next time I sit on a couch having a conversation about the future, it won't feel like negotiation. It won't feel like bracing. It won't feel like convincing. It will feel mutual, and I won't have to shrink to fit it. That's the real comeback. Not getting him back, getting myself back. Now stay with me for the closing reflection. How many of us stay in relationships that are good but not aligned? How many of us convince ourselves that love should be enough? How many times do we silence the quiet voice inside us that says, "This isn't your forever"? Was it love or was it fear of being alone? Was it devotion or was it denial? Sometimes the most painful breakups aren't explosive. They're gentle, they're mature, they're kind. And that kindness makes it harder to villainize the person you lost. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You can love someone deeply and still not belong in their future. And staying doesn't make you loyal, it makes you misaligned. So if you're in something right now that feels warm but uncertain, ask yourself, am I being chosen or am I waiting to be? Because you deserve someone who doesn't hesitate when it comes to building a life with you, not someone you have to convince, not someone you have to wait for. Love is powerful, but shared vision, that's what builds forever. If this story hit a little too close to home, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had a breakup where nobody did anything wrong? Would you have stayed, or would you have walked away too? On this channel, we talk about the kind of heartbreak that doesn't make headlines, the quiet ones, the complicated ones, the ones that force you to grow. If you believe choosing yourself is sometimes the hardest form of love, make sure you're subscribed to the breakup stories. And if you're healing right now, you're not weak, you're becoming. I'll see you in the next story.